Bonjour tout le monde and welcome back to FrenchArena. Today we're diving into the fascinating world of French language and expression with similes and metaphors. Understanding and using these figures of speech can greatly enhance your fluency and expressive power in the French language. By the end of today's fantastic lesson, you'll be able to recognize and use common French similes and metaphors and recognize them in conversations and writing. Vous êtes prêts? C'est parti! Before we get started with today's lesson, to help you dive deeper into this exciting topic, I have created for you a free ebook that you can download. It includes all the samples we're going to discuss today, plus a quiz for you at the end. All you need to do is input your name and email address in the link in the description box below, and today's PDF will be sent directly to your inbox. Also, stick around to the end of today's lesson because there's also a quiz to test your knowledge on what we learned today. With that being said, let us start by understanding the difference between similes and metaphors. In French, a simile is called la comparaison. La comparaison. And a metaphor is la métaphore. La métaphore. La comparaison is a figure of speech that directly compares two different things using words such as like or as. And in French, those would just be comme, tel ou pareil. Now, la métaphore is a figure of speech that describes an action or an object in a way that isn't literally true, but helps explain an idea or make a comparison by stating one thing is another. Simply put, it makes a direct comparison without using comparative words. Now, there are just some grammatical rules I would like you to remember when using metaphors or similes. For example, instead of stating a direct comparison, a metaphor asserts that something is something else. Let me show you what I mean. So, for example, I'm going to give you a literal sentence and a sentence using metaphor so you can see the difference. If, for instance, I wish to say she is very strong, I could say elle est très forte. That's the literal tense. Now, if I wanted to form a sentence using a metaphor, I could say elle a un cœur de pierre. She has a heart of stone. In this example, elle a un cœur de pierre directly compares the person's emotional state to the hardness of stone, implying that she's emotionally cold or unfeeling. Unlike a simile, which would use a comparative word like comme, which means like, a metaphor directly equates the person to the object or quality being described. Another grammatical rule to remember is that similes and metaphors agree with adjectives and nouns. When using either of these figures of speech, the adjectives and nouns that modify or describe the subject must agree in gender and number with the subjects they modify. So for example, I could say, literally just a simple sentence, ses yeux sont bleus. Ses yeux sont bleus. But if I wanted to make the sentence into a simile, I would say, ses yeux sont doux comme des pétales de rose. You see, which means her eyes are soft like rose petals. In this simile, doux agrees in gender and number with pétales, which is plural and feminine. And this adjective rule applies the same for metaphors, okay? I just wanted to put out those grammatical rules for you just so that when you see them, you understand it. And lastly, we also have verb agreements. And so verbs used in sentences containing similes and metaphors should agree in conjugation with the subject they refer to. This is a basic grammatical rule that applies in French universally. So just ensure you remember these when using similes or metaphors. And so now let's take a look at some sample sentences to really understand the difference between a simile, which is what? La comparaison, or a metaphor, la métaphore, okay? So for example, if I want to just make a simple sentence, I could say he runs fast. But if I wanted to make it into a simile, I wanted to say he runs as fast as lightning. In French, I will say il court rapide comme l'éclair. He runs as fast as lightning. Let's spice it up. Why make it boring and just say he runs fast? Let's say he runs as fast as lightning. Another example, instead of just saying he is strong, I could switch it up to he is as strong as a lion. And in French, that would be il est fort comme un lion. And so another example, instead of just saying he's rich, I could say he is as rich as Crésus, for instance. And in French, that would be il est riche comme Crésus. Do you know who Crésus is? Extremely wealthy. This was way back, but extremely wealthy. Another example for similes, instead of just saying his clothes are white, I could say his clothes are as white as snow. And in the French language, how do I say this? Ses vêtements sont blancs comme neige. That's better, right? Yeah. And the final example for similes, I could say he is as deaf as a pot. And that would be il est sûr comme un pot. So there we have it for similes. I'm hoping that with these examples, once you see them in the text or you're reading them or you hear them, you know that, okay, this person just used a simile. Let us take a look at some sample sentences for metaphors. For example, number 1, I could say, il a un cœur de lion. Il a un cœur de lion. Remember, for metaphors, they assert that something is something else, okay? Hence the sentence we just read. So even if what I'm trying to say is he has a heart of a lion, it basically just means he is very brave. But instead of just simply stating he is very brave, you can use that sentence because it's metaphor to just make it a bit more interesting, okay? Let's take a look at number 2. So instead of really saying c'est une personne trompeuse, which is he's a deceitful person or a deceitful person, you can just equally say fais attention à lui, c'est un serpent. Okay? Let's look at number 3. Now, if I want to say she has an excellent memory, I could just say elle a une excellente mémoire. But if I wanted to make it into a metaphor, I would say elle a une mémoire d'éléphant, because apparently elephants have fantastic memories. So you see that it's a metaphor, you can use it that way. I remember what I said about metaphors. I'm not saying she has a memory like that of a or like a. I'm not using like or as, I'm just literally stating, okay? I'm just asserting that something is something else. And for a much more advanced metaphor, I can say, la jeunesse ne fut qu'un ténébreux orage. Completely different, but yes, it's also a metaphor. And let's take a look at the final sentence. And the next sample sentence, le temps, cet ogre jamais rassasié, engloutit la vie. So do you see how this is metaphor? It's a bit more advanced, but do you see the metaphor in this? And so there we have it. That is it. It's a short lesson, short and quick lesson, but I really hope you got to understand the differences between similes and metaphors. Now, let me test you with a quiz. I need to be sure that you have a clear understanding of similes and metaphors so that when you hear them in a conversation or you read them in a text, you can pinpoint which is la comparaison ou la métaphore. And so for our quiz, there are going to be 5 questions, all right? You're going to indicate whether it's a simile or a metaphor. Please do not forget, in the comment section below, let me know your score, how many you got out of everything. Number 1, il pleut des codes comme un rideau de pelle. Is it A or B? Correct. It is la comparaison, A. Let's take a look at number 2. Elle a un sourire éclatant comme le soleil au matin. Is it A or B? Correct. It is B. Aussi, la comparaison. Numéro 3. Son cœur est un océan de tristesse. Is it A or B? Correct. It is A, la métaphore. Numéro 4. Il est fort comme un roc. Is it A or B? Bravo! It is A, la comparaison ou a simile. Numéro 5. Ses chevaux sont doux comme de la soie. Is it A or B? Correct. It is B, la comparaison. Tell me in the comment section below, how many did you get? All right, we have come to the end of today's lesson. In summary, do not forget, what is a simile? A simile uses words like or as to compare two different things. So in the French language, you would use comme. Okay, that's like to compare to different things. But a metaphor makes a direct comparison without using comparative words. So for example, I would say his heart is a stone. Practice identifying and using these figures of speech, and you'll find your ability to communicate in French will greatly improve. Do not forget what I said. If you would just love to review today's lesson and want to have a copy of the free ebook, all you need to do is input your name and email address in the link in the description box below. And today's lesson, alongside a completely different quiz, will be sent directly to your inbox. Thank you for watching today's fantastic lesson. If you loved today's lesson, please do not forget to share with anyone else who would like to understand French similes and metaphors as well. And also subscribe and like this lesson so that I am very sure you love lessons like this and I can continue creating such for you. Until I see you in the next lesson where I teach you all about French coordinating conjunctions, bonne journée!